I have a Steam Deck here, and in today's video I'll be showing you how to download, install, and set up EmuDeck from start to finish. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this tool, EmuDeck is an installation script that can jumpstart your emulation needs on a Steam Deck. And this can be incredibly useful because it does not require you to manually install and set up each emulator. However, there's much more to it since EmuDeck also handles the folder structure for all of your ROMs and firmware files, and it does some work to set up hotkeys so that they can be as consistent as possible across all of those emulators. Now, I could run through all of these features, but instead I'll just direct you to the EmuDeck wiki here. And you'll be able to find this link down in the video description below. So let's get to it. We're going to be installing EmuDeck on this Steam Deck, and we'll begin by visiting the EmuDeck website. I installed Firefox through the Discover App Store here, but you can use any browser you'd like. You can even transfer the install file to the Steam Deck and execute it that way if you wanted to avoid a browser entirely. So from here, we're going to choose on Download, and then we are going to pick SteamOS. You can see that we're being told that we need to copy the installer to the desktop and then execute it by double-clicking it. So we're going to click on OK. We're going to wait for this installer script to download, and then we are going to click on the folder button so that we can open up the containing folder. And just like it says, we are then going to drag this to our desktop. And we're going to move it there so that now, whenever we actually look at the desktop, we can see that install script that we just downloaded. So let's go ahead and execute it. We're going to click on Continue. And when it's ready, you're going to be greeted with this welcome screen, where it asks if you want to follow through with easy mode, or if you would rather do custom mode. Now, if you want the default installation options, I highly recommend going with easy mode. There's nothing wrong with it. When I installed this on my Steam Deck for the first time, I went with custom mode, and I ended up not really changing much at all. And I'll be going through custom mode here in today's video, so you get the full idea of what EmuDeck is actually installing and setting up for us. And you should be aware that you fully have the ability to choose easy mode here, and then go back once installation has finished to manually configure things that you're not a fan of. But again, we're going to be going with custom mode. So we're going to click that and then choose Continue. Now you can choose to set up your ROM directory for EmuDeck on the internal storage of your Steam Deck. However, it can also be saved to a micro SD card as well. We'll be installing it directly to the deck here today, but if you can't afford it, then I recommend looking into keeping your ROMs organized on an SD card. And if you get one that is rated fast enough, you won't even see any noticeable differences in load times compared to your internal storage. I'll even include a link to the SD card I personally bought for my own Steam Deck down in the video description below. But again, we're going to be choosing the internal storage just for today's example. So we'll click that and then click Next. Now naturally we're going to be selecting the Steam Deck here. And now you'll get to choose which emulators you want EmuDeck to install for us. You can see the options are either highlighted or they are grayed out. And I recommend you going through this entire list to click or unclick, so highlight or deselect the emulators that you want installed on your Steam Deck. One thing that is listed here that is not an emulator is Emulation Station, and that's actually a separate program that EmuDeck can install, which allows you to load and play your ROMs from there instead of loading them up through the SteamOS user interface. I'm going to be keeping all of these set as a default, but again, if you do not have a reason to play anything on ScumVM, then just deselect it. Or if you're not a fan of Yuzu, you can deselect that and install this switch emulator instead. Once you have this set up how you like, we're going to click on Continue. And this is the place that we can select which emulators we want EmuDeck to configure for us. Selected emulators will have their configurations reset and then updated and set up to EmuDeck's defaults. If you deselect an emulator here, then it will not be touched when EmuDeck goes to configure them. However, again, I recommend keeping these all set up so that EmuDeck can configure them properly. When that's done, we're going to click on Continue. So here we can choose to set up the AutoSave feature or not. If this is enabled, then every game emulated with these consoles listed here will be saved the moment you exit that emulator on the Steam Deck. Not only that, but EmuDeck will automatically load that save state when you open the emulator again. I like this feature, so we're going to turn it on here. Here we have some integration into retro achievements. And this is a free service from a website where you can collect and showcase achievements for retro games that never had them back in the day. I'm going to be skipping this in this video, but it is something I set up on my personal Steam Deck. Here we have a setting that allows you to use themed bezels to help hide the black bars on some of these older consoles listed here. By default, this is set to on, but if you would rather see the black bars, then you can change this to off if you'd like. And now we have the ability to set the aspect ratio for some of these older systems. For example, on the classic Sega system, we can choose to play these in the original aspect ratio or one that has smaller black bars. And there's a few of these for you to go through. So EmuDeck will let you choose if you want to go with the original, a modified, so that they can help to reduce the black bars, or in some instances, the true resolution of the console entirely. And since we tend to be more sensitive to the aspect ratio of certain game consoles than others, we can set this up for each of the emulators that we have chosen to install on the Steam Deck with the EmuDeck tool. There are even some additional mods built into EmuDeck that can be enabled here, like choosing custom shaders or not. So we have this LCD shader for these systems that we can keep off or turn on. And the same thing for CRT shader for these consoles. Since Emulation Station is being installed from EmuDeck, we have the ability to pick an Emulation Station theme, which we can pick Epic Noir, which is default, RB Simple, or Modern. Now, before EmuDeck will actually install and set up any of this, you'll get a summary page of what is going on. So here, you'll see all of the consoles that EmuDeck will install and the ones that it will not. You'll see all of the emulators that EmuDeck will configure and the ones that it will not. You'll see your additional customization options, like those retro shaders. And then you'll see the installation path, whether that is your home folder on the internal storage, your micro SD card, or what have you. When you're ready, we're going to click on Finish. And now we're going to let EmuDeck run through its script so that it can do all of the work for us. And this is really where EmuDeck shines. We have already told the script which emulators we want and how we want them set up. So now, instead of having to download and configure each of these, EmuDeck will do all of that work on the Steam Deck for us. When it's all finished, you'll get some check marks on individual items that went successfully, and then an X on things that EmuDeck had issues with. Since we have check marks across the board here, we're going to then click on Add Games. And this is an interesting tidbit of the install process. This is a feature that helps you to migrate all of your ROMs and BIOS files onto the Steam Deck. So if you want to go through this, you'll connect a USB drive, either a hard drive or a thumb drive, to your Steam Deck through the USB port, and then let EmuDeck create a directory tree needed for those emulators that you just installed. You will then be able to take that drive, connect it to your PC, and move your ROMs into the corresponding folders. So you'll move your NES ROMs into the NES folder. And then you'll move your PlayStation ROMs into the PS1 folder. Then, when you plug that drive back into the Steam Deck here, while you're at this menu, you can then transfer all of those ROMs to the Steam Deck, and EmuDeck will move those ROMs into the exact directory that they need to be in. We won't be doing that here today, but it is a nice little feature that can save a ton of time for those who have been collecting ROMs over the years. Now, when you get to this screen here, you'll know that everything has been completed and EmuDeck is fully installed on your Steam Deck. This is actually the menu screen that will appear anytime you launch EmuDeck while you are in desktop mode. And it gives you quick access to things like changing those options that we chose during the setup process, and the ability to manage the emulators that you have installed, including resetting the configuration files and manually updating them. There's also a section down here that offers a number of incredibly useful tools that have been created by the developer community. We can use Power Tools right here, which is a Decky loader plugin to control the performance of our Steam Deck. Or we can use the BIOS checker tool to check and see which console BIOS files we have yet to install. Because while EmuDeck does do a lot of hard work for us, they are making sure the project is not illegal in any way. So BIOS files for consoles like the Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, PS1, and others will not be included if they are prohibited from doing so. Now, before I end this video and let you go play all of your favorite retro games, I want to talk about how we can actually access these emulators from gaming mode. Now, I already talked to you about Emulation Station, which is an app that works as a central launcher for all of your emulators. But you can also choose to have each individual emulator show up as their very own non-Steam game. No matter which route you choose, we'll need to launch the Steam ROM Manager from here. This will bring you to their patching tool that EmuDeck uses to add things to the Steam Deck gaming mode user interface. EmuDeck is calling all of these parsers, and if you see it toggled on, that means it will show up in gaming mode as a non-Steam game. So as mentioned, there could be two ways you go about this. I actually recommend you going in and toggling parsers to off so that everything down here is disabled, and then go in and manually enable the ones you want to show up. So you could choose to only add Emulation Station if you wanted. This will keep your non-Steam tab cleaner, but it will require you to launch this application before you can then access the emulators you have installed. I certainly understand the appeal of this setup, but it isn't what I went through when I installed this on my Steam Deck. Instead, I would rather have the individual emulators show up as non-Steam games. That way it is quicker for me to jump into a game since I don't have to load up Emulation Station first. So what I did is I went and toggled on Emulation Station just so that I had the choice. And then I toggled on the emulators category. Now with that done, you should then go through this list and add every emulator that you want to show up in the Steam Deck gaming mode UI. So if you wanted the Panasonic 3DO to show up, then you should enable that from the toggle here. So I have gone through and toggled on all of the emulators that I want added to the Steam Deck gaming mode UI as a non-Steam game. And when you're done, we're first going to click on Preview, and then we're going to click on Parse. Here we can see and get a look of all of the emulators that are going to be added. You can come in here and you can change what the image looks like if you want. But when you are ready to commit, we're going to be clicking on the Save to Steam button. If you wanted, you could also use Steam ROM Manager to manually add a ROM as an actual game to your SteamOS library. That way you don't have to open up the emulator before diving into the ROM. but I won't be going over that here in today's video. Instead, that's something that you can do once you get your games in the correct folders. I could also cover this topic in a future video if it's something that the community would be interested in seeing. So if you want me to do a video about adding ROMs to your Steam OS library, then let me know down in the comments section below. After we have done the Save to Steam button, we're just going to exit out. We're going to exit out. And we're going to be closing anything else that is running so that we can return over to gaming mode. But we are finally done setting up EmuDeck. Now that we are back into gaming mode, we can see how everything looks. We're viewing the library. We're going to go and check our NonSteam Games to see all of the emulators that have been installed and added. We should be able to immediately begin playing our game. So that wraps up my guide on how to install EmuDeck on the Steam Deck. The process can seem long, but the best part of it is that EmuDeck does 99% of the work for us. Now we simply need to transfer our ROMs over and install our BIOS files for them to work correctly. And if you have any questions about this process or the Steam Deck in general, then don't hesitate to use the comments section down below.